Hey, we got a Craftsman M210 lawnmower here this morning. Customer brought it in and said that it's sputtering out on them. Well, one of the most common causes of something like that on an engine like this, now this is one that's got a primer button. They also have ones that have, just the regular air filter here for the ones with the automatic choke. Either way, the air filter was completely full of oil at that point. We went ahead and flipped it out, ran it for a little while. Smoke all cleared up and everything like that, but it was completely soaked. We thought that maybe the customer had tipped it over. Now it's pretty easy to see on one of the models like this because there's two holes in the back. A lot of times the top will be completely filled with oil and then all the way down. If it's something like what's going on here. If you've tipped it upside down or tipped it over to the air filter side, the bottom's going to be completely soaked in oil only. And that's normally the case. We're going to, now as we have ran this for a little while, we took the filter back off, and as we're looking at the filter here, you can see just kind of a round spot where it's pushing oil right back out through the breather tube. So this is the breather tube that comes from the backside here and goes into the crankcase on the backside. Now with that, putting oil all back through, now it does look like it's not been connected on the backside either, and it's dripping kind of all over the carburetor and down onto the deck. Oil's coming out there also. I'm going to show you why this happens on this engine, and it's the same in both of these different models, and it's a pretty easy fix. Now we had one like this, I don't know, a little while back, where it was kind of making some loud knocking noises and it was getting a bunch of silver color back through here. Now if that's the case, if you're getting a bunch of silver color through there, you know that the engine's seen better days to begin with. So don't go through all this trouble to try to get this fixed up, but this is an easy fix as far as the oil goes to stop that from leaking. You won't need a whole lot. Basically, it's going to be a breather reed right on top of the engine. Show you how to flip that out. Doesn't take hardly any time at all. Permatex gasket sealer is probably the ingredient that most people aren't going to have. We use the ultra gray, and then we always replace the flywheel key while we have this off, and then the breather reed is going to be the 697124. So what that breather reed does is it sits right up under here and it closes off when the crankcase pressurizes so the oil doesn't come back through the intake. It's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be able to breathe air, but the oil shouldn't get out of there. When that reed goes bad, when that breather goes bad, it is allowed to get out of there. So here we're going to use a 15/16 to take off the big nut. Now what we did here is we just removed the top three that were 5/16 and then pulled that whole top off. Now this 15/16 comes right off. Everything pulls straight up. Now there is a kind of a spacer down in there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just thread this back on about even in order to pull this flywheel off. Now they do make a flywheel puller. We do have those. I'm going to guess that the majority of you watching this do not have those, so I'm going to show you how to do it without having one. Now we're going to remove this ignition coil. That's a 1/4 inch. They're just 2 bolts. And that's just to get it out of the way so we can get up underneath. And I'm just going to push down. And I'm going to get me a 3-pounder, 3-pound sledge. And you want to hit this as square as possible. So if anything's in your way, move to the other side. This fuel tank comes up and off. We're going to need to get it out of the way. It just pulls straight up, kind of over to the side. Now it is easier to do if the fuel tank is empty or low. That way it's not leaking out. If it's too full, it will leak out of this breather hole here. So let's see, just pushing down on here. That popped the flywheel up and off. Now the brake's still on there. I am going to go ahead and use a clamp up top and just clamp off my bail at this point. And the spark plug being unplugged is something that if you're not using an impact at this point to remove this nut, you will have to unplug the spark plug, and you'll have to wedge something in between the blade and the deck at the bottom in order to keep it from moving while you're removing that nut from the top. That's if you don't have an impact, which I'm assuming probably a lot of you don't. Now these flywheel keys, they say you can reuse them. I don't ever like to reuse them. Again, it's a 222698S. We're gonna replace this one. Now the rest of the bolts at the bottom are also gonna be 5/16. Looks like there's 5 of them. They're all the same thread, so no need to worry about where any of them go. And then you'll have to break that seal and kind of pull that straight up and off. I don't worry about the dipstick. It comes also, but you can pull it off independently if you'd like. Also, when we put it back together, it's a little easier to do it separately after we've installed this. Now we're down to where the reed is. Now it doesn't look like that's snapping back like it should. So I think what our diagnosis was is correct. Now that's going to come off, I believe that's 5.5, metric 5.5 to get that nut off. And came out just like such. And that's how the new one's going to go back in. Now if you've tipped it the wrong way and you turn it back over and you're running it and it still won't stop burning oil, let it run for a little while longer. A lot of times it'll take a good 20 minutes depending on how much oil you've got there up through the system. It'll take a good 20 minutes for everything to burn off and everything to get back to normal. Don't give up on it too soon. Right, now that we've got it back down on there, seems like it's going up and down like it should. We want to remove all of this sealant that's around the outside. You can do that pretty easily with a wire brush. Now you want to try not to get anything down on the inside. That is very difficult, yes. We're going to blow all this out afterwards, but try to keep it as clean as possible. The less you get down in there, the better. This is all going to reseal up. Seems like it's coming off pretty well at the top. On the other side, you can use also a brass wire brush, or you can use a razor blade if that's easier for you in some spots. But most of this stuff, a brass wire brush is going to do great. If you use a steel one, it kind of scratches everything up real quick. We don't really want to do that. Not exactly going to ruin anything in this case at the top where this is at or what it does, but now let's get our cover back. I'm gonna blow it off real quick. this side, it's got some kind of bigger chunks in some areas. A lot of times pulling those bigger spots off with a razor blade or something. Gonna make it easier. And then we've got to re-permatex this. I don't make a gasket or anything for it. Want as much off of that as possible there. And then we're going to seal that whole area going around back up. Now that all the big stuff's off, alright, nice and clean. You can run some isopropyl alcohol over it if you'd like. A lot of times that's what we do, just to kind of clean everything up and give you a good bonding surface. Just wipe it down. And then we're going to, just a thin little bead, you don't need a lot on this. Should be in pretty good shape. Set that right back down where we got it from. I'm going to put these 5/16 bolts right back in. I like to start them all first. Otherwise, a lot of times you'll get one that doesn't line up. Now on these, you don't want to over torque them. You just want to snug them up good. Now we can put the flywheel and the flywheel key back on. It's easier if you figure out where your keyway is. Kind of join it towards you. Move your coil out of the way. And again, you've got to have that brake unlocked. Otherwise, this isn't going to go back on there smoothly at all. You can at that point put the key back down in there. Now I do clean up this shaft a little bit. I didn't show you guys that. I was right about when my camera died. You can use either a wire brush or a piece of sandpaper or something like that, but if you clean everything up off of this shaft, that's going to keep this from shearing right back off. There were a lot of issues at one point, apparently from what one of the old heads taught me. Sand that down and it'll keep you from having issues. I have seen people replace them and then they bring them back in, you know, for something else. It won't start after that, and yeah, sheared flywheel key. I don't have any issues, but we always do them that way. Now the cup goes back on, and then again that spacer with the spacer part back down in. Put your nut back on. Screw it by hand, and then you can get a good tightening with. And we use just a business card for the ignition coil in order to gap it. To figure out where your magnet is. I think we found it there. Boy, that's hard to get off. All right. So we'll move it around. And this is just the spacing for your coil. You want it to be spaced away from the flywheel. I don't honestly know what the actual spacing for this is. We've done them this way for so long. Why use a feeler gauge if you can just use a business card you got handy? Out of the way. Perfect. Now we're going to lift this just straight back up and then push it down onto there. Now with your breather tube, it's got to hook onto this nipple. If it's not on there, that's where you'll get anything down here if you start having any issues. But at that point, it'll start pulling debris in either way on either side. Now your tube on the other side, it's going to go back down straight in and lock in at the top here also at the same time. So it slid down in and it went in at the same time. And then we've just got the top left to put on, which is just those 3 5/16 bolts. Looking pretty good. Now with this Permatex, I let it sit and dry for 24 hours before I use it. Some people use it right away. I don't trust that whatsoever. Before we start this back up, we're gonna let it sit, but that's why we were getting oil back through into this air filter, and that is why this thing was completely full of oil all over, why it's all down here and everything else. So if you're having an issue like this, or your air filter keeps getting full of oil even though you're not tipping it over or anything like that, or don't have any other issues, check that out. Nice quick easy fix. You know, that couldn't have been what, more than 20 minutes, $7-8 part, something that's nice and quick, easy, and simple for someone to do at home by themselves. Of course, you would need the Permatex also, which does add a few dollars, but hopefully this helps someone out there with an issue they're having. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.